Hey guys, welcome back to the Comic Boys Media Network channel. I am Alon, one of your hosts, and today I'm going to be doing a spoiler review of 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. So I watched 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple on opening night on the day it came out. I think it was January 16th. Um, and going into this film, I was very much looking forward to it, I will admit. 28 Years Later, the one that came out in June, I think the first half of 28 Years Later was terrific. It was like a proper zombie horror movie, and that's what I loved about it so much. Um, it was very well done, a lot of intensity, a lot of zombies, a lot of violence, a lot of gore, very suspenseful. And then the second half was okay. It wasn't as good as the first, but then there was that last scene with the Jimmies where they all of a sudden turn into these Power Rangers, and I was like, yeah, dude, like you've just completely gone off the rails with the tone, and I'm not on board with this. Um, so I saw the first trailer for 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple come out in September, and my first reaction was, huh, okay, this looks interesting. This looks a bit different to 28 Years Later. It looks like it has a different tone. Obviously, it has a different director, but it was written by Danny Boyle, Alex Garland, all those things. Um, so I'm going to start by saying this is a good movie. I'm not going to lie to you guys. This is a good movie. I enjoyed it. Yeah, it has its flaws. It has some holes here and there that I hope that they cover in the third film. Overall, it's a good movie. It's got horror. It's got some scary bits. It's got intensity. It's got suspense. It's got a lot of gore. It is a very, very bloody, very brutal, very gory film. You see parts where the Alpha Samson rips a wanderer's head off of his shoulders, and you see his spine there. And in a later scene, you see him tearing his head open and eating his brains. Very, very gory film. Very, very bloody. Lots of blood. Lots of people being skinned alive, cutting, all that stuff. Like, very bloody film. And I think that's why at Cineplay, I don't know about the rest of the world, how your guys' parental guidance guidelines go, but all across here in Canada, everywhere it got an 18 plus rating. And every so often, there's going to be an 18 plus movie that comes out. 28 years later, The Bone Temple is one of them. Um, so 28 years later, The Bone Temple starts off right after the events of 28 years later, where Spike, main character played by Alfie Williams, meets this cult called the Jimmies, and the Jimmies is led by Sir Jimmy Crystal, who sees himself as not old Nick. He sees himself as this messenger, this son of Satan, old Nick, and he believes that he has a duty to carry old Nick's work and terror by committing acts of violence on the innocent population, and it's what Sir Jimmy Crystal calls charity. Giving charity to old Nick, and Jimmy Crystal was very excellently played by Jack O'Connell, who had a breakout role. Maybe it's a breakout role. I'm not sure. He had a big role in Sinners, obviously, which everybody was talking about. But yeah, he was terrific in this one as well. Ray Fiennes is Dr. Ian Kelson. Like, I have nothing more to say about Ray Fiennes other than the fact that he's just so talented. Like, everything he's in, and he's got so much. He's played Voldemort in Harry Potter. He played M in James Bond. He played Kelson in 28 Years Later. Like, you can't take away anything from this guy. He's just so talented, and he's a true, like, seasoned veteran in Hollywood that every time I'm gonna see him in a new movie or any other movie he's been in, I just know like he's gonna do great, and he did great in this one. But what was interesting about Sir Jimmy Crystal and Dr. Kelson was their differences. I will not lie. When I saw that ending scene for 28 Years Later, where the Jimmies were all like Power Rangers killing infecteds and all that stuff, I was not so sure how on board I was with them being, the main villains in 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. But then early screenings began in December. I think it was like in the middle of December. I want to say approximately. And one common sentiment among everybody was that the Jimmies were genuinely evil. They were genuinely sadistic. They were actually like horrible people in this film, and they were like actually like complete fucking maniacs. And then I was like, okay, massive sigh of relief. I was like, thank God, because I'm sorry, I could not watch a horror movie like that if the Jimmies were like they were in 28 Years Later at the end of that film. And in this film, the Jimmies were actually crazy. They were, yeah, they were pure evil. They were psychos. They were maniacs. They were crazy. They had no regard for human life whatsoever. And I loved it. I loved every bit of the Jimmies because I don't like seeing movie villains where it's like a misunderstood villain, or he has motivations that, he's doing it for other people to protect himself, to protect others in his family or whatever. I'm at a point in my life and in where I watch movies where, yeah, like I understand these kinds of villains exist, but like I want to see a villain that I hate. I want to see pure evil. And I feel like not all the Jimmies were pure evil, but I feel like at least Sir Jimmy Crystal was pure evil. He was pure evil in his purest form, and I love that. I loved that, for example, there's this one scene where the Jimmies were torturing a bunch of innocent people. Awful scene. Not awful in how it's done, just awful in the things that happen in it. They were torturing them. They were skinning them alive. Yeah, it's such a gruesome film. It's so unbelievably gory. Like they were skinning those innocent people alive, and you could see it too. Like there were shots of their skin. It's just so gruesome. It was. I love the gore. Like I don't know. I love the gore in the film. I think that was one of the better parts. Anyway, I'm getting off track here. There was one scene, right, where while four people from this random house were being tortured and skinned alive, one of them was hiding in the barn and watching it quietly. Um, and she kills one of the Jimmies with a hook that impales one of the Jimmies. And I'll get into that Jimmy a little bit because I actually really liked her, even though she had a short part. She impales one of the Jimmies with a heavy hook, and once she gets away, Sir Jimmy Crystal sends Spike to kill her, in which he doesn't because Spike is not like that. He's not built like that. He's not a Jimmy. He's not about that life. Um, and then she gets away, and then Sir Jimmy Crystal, like, he's like, hey, where's the woman's body? Like, where is she? And then he's like, I killed her. It's hard to find her body. He didn't kill her. He lied. He lied to Jimmy Crystal. He's like, I killed her, and her body's really hard to find. And then Sir Jimmy Crystal's like, so you didn't even think to cut off her face or to cut her unborn child from her stomach? Like, are you kidding me? If that's not evil, if that's not an evil person in its purest form, I don't know what is. I have never heard a villain on a movie screen say something like that. Like, he sends one of his fingers, he calls them their fingers. He sends off one of his fingers to kill a woman, and as a trophy, he says to skin off her face or to cut off her unborn baby. I am sorry, but I've never heard a movie villain in my life ever say something as crazy as that. But that's why I love Jimmy Crystal so much. Yeah, sure, I might sound like a sick individual, but I love Jimmy Crystal because he is the pure portrayal of evil. I, you know, I I understand. Hollywood's done a lot of villains where they had motivations that were understandable, like, somebody's doing it for their family, for the sake of humanity, and like it's a villain that you can't hate it a lot. You can hate him because he's fighting against the hero, but you understand his intentions, right? With Sir Jimmy Crystal, not only did I hate him, but it was such an excellent portrayal of pure evil, right? And then there was another scene where Kelson meets Jimmy at the Bone Temple, and Kelson does this whole ritual for the Jimmies to make himself seem like Old Nick, right? And so Jimmy Crystal then asks, hey, Old Nick, Dr. Kelson portraying Old Nick, what more guide do you have for us? And Kelson just vaguely says, like, continue your journey, continue your mission, continue your continue your mission. And then Sir Jimmy Crystal goes on like, okay, so let's continue making people scream as we tear their skins off and sending their pain up to old Nick, and just some other purely horrible, nasty, psychotic stuff. I loved it. I loved him as a villain because I can't stress this enough. I love him as a villain because he's pure evil and you want him to lose. And when he hangs off of that cross upside down, great. I loved it. That's evil done with. Yeah, like great villain. Excellent villain. I think it's one of the better villains that I've seen in a little while on a movie screen, Sir Jimmy Crystal. And I'm excited to see where it goes from here for 28 years later 3, which has been greenlit, which I don't think is going to come out as quickly as these two did. 28 years later came out in June. This one is out in January. That's like a 7-month. That's actually 28 week difference. Actually, I read that online somewhere. So I'm not expecting the third part to come out this summer or anything like that. I think it's going to take like a year or two for it to come out, which is fine. But I can't wait for the third one and see what's in store. Yeah. One of my biggest things that I was hoping to see in this film was the further development of Spike's character, because I feel like this was a good opportunity for his character to be like a central part, like the central part of the film. He was a central part of, no, he actually was the central part of 28 years later, but I really was interested to see his further development because, he's stepping into this world with the Jimmies. He's left the island behind. His father's looking for him. While I would have loved to see a lot more Spike, I think his character to me is very interesting. I didn't mind not seeing him as much because of the fact that, you have the Dr. Kelson and Samson Alpha subplot where, Kelson and the Alpha are interacting with each other, and and Kelson's helping the Alpha regain his humanity, and, Kelson's trying to understand the psychological, psychiatric nature of the infection. And then you have the Jimmy side plot, which, was terrific. I loved every bit of it. But the scenario in which I would have actually minded like not seeing as much Spike is if the Kelson and Jimmy Crystal plots didn't interest me as much. So I can kind of give Nia DaCosta some leeway with that, with not doing as much Spike, because of the fact that the Kelson and Jimmy's plots were very interesting and developed the story really well. And they kind of also converged. Like if you guys have ever seen the movie Weapons, like you have 4 different stories that all meet at one point in the third act. This one also does the same thing. It's got these 2 stories and they meet together in the last act. So even in Spike's scenes, I thought it was pretty good. I just wish that there was more of Spike. So there was the one Jimmy, right? Her name was Jemima, I think. She had these fairy wings on her back. She was interesting. I was hoping that they wouldn't kill her off, because she was a mix of like weird and like a bit not okay up here and like a bit childish as well. Like she was doing the Teletubbies dance in front of all the other Jimmies, and she was doing the Teletubbies dance as she was getting ready to kill somebody who challenged her to a fight. Like she was a good mix of like weird and like just, yeah, I just thought she was weird and I really liked it. I wish she didn't die off. I think that if they continued her story and like she continued on, I think that could have been an interesting addition. So I think another thing I should address is the cameo at the end of the film. So if you guys haven't seen the film, so Jim, played by Cillian Murphy, the wonderful Cillian Murphy, world class actor, A-lister, Oscar winner. Can't take anything away from Cillian Murphy. So he appears at the end of the film. So, he started the franchise of 28 Days Later, which came out 23 years ago. Came out in 2002. So he appears at the end of the film, and he is giving to his daughter lessons about European history. They talk about like World War I, World War II, for Treaty of Versailles. He's just trying to teach her about the world before the rage virus took over. And so it was very interesting to see him come up because yeah, it kind of tells me that yeah, he survived this for the last 28 years. But now it's setting, and from what I've read, is that he's going to be a main character in the third part, in 28 Years Later, Part 3. Um, which should be interesting because, this franchise started with him, it's going to end with him. And I think that's a really smart way to close it out. Um, Even in the very few minutes that he had on screen, I think he was still good. So I'm also guessing that because that he had a child as well with, um, what's her name? With the woman that he was with in 28 Days Later. That's my guess. It's not my guess. Probably what happened. Um, but I knew beforehand that he was going to be in the film because there were a lot of cast members who said yeah, Cillian Murphy's going to be at the end of this film. So I kind of knew he was going to be in this. When I was watching 28 Years Later, I didn't know if he was going to be in it or not, um, but in the Bone Temple, yeah, I knew going into it, yeah, I knew he was going to be at the end of this film. How long? I don't know. I wasn't sure. I mean, I didn't have the insider information to know. But yeah, he was there. And it should set up an interesting path because you have a lot of plots to cover. You have Spike. You have, you can expand on this new Jim plot. He survived the infection for the last 28 years. Obviously, he's still alive and he has a daughter that he's raising. You have the new Alpha. I haven't even spoken about Samson. Um, you have a lot of holes that I think you can fill and a lot of plots that you can look into in 28 Years Later Part 3 that, I think would be really worth looking at. Yeah, the Alpha. He had a very typical Alpha start. Not typical Alpha start in like that way. I'm just a typical Alpha start in the sense of how he left off in 28 Years Later. In 28 Years Later, he was like a typical rageful big zombie, and he started off like that in this one. Literally, his first scene, he like digs his fingers into someone's face and rips his head off of his shoulders, and his spine comes off, and he tears his head open and eats his he eats his brains and all that. It's like, wow, like no wonder why this film got a hard R 18 plus rating at Cineplex. Um, so Samson had a lot of interesting developments in this film, and I think he was excuse me. I think he was one of the more interesting characters in this film, and I really liked him and Kelson's development because it was interesting to see Samson regain his humanity, and show that this rage virus also has a psychological element to it. From my understanding, Samson got his humanity back. Like, he was obviously able to speak. He thanked Kelson for his help. As he was as like he got ready to carry Kelson, the dying. Yeah, Kelson dies in this at the end of this film. Um, as he was getting ready to carry him, he fully says like a normal human being, "Hey, Kelson, thank you." And then there's another scene where he, before he starts fighting a bunch of affected people on a train, he says, "I already have a ticket," because he was imagining some things when he was a child before he got infected. That was a really cool scene as well. And I think that was the demonstrated that Samson still had his alpha strength, but he had some humanity because that train scene, he was fighting a bunch of infecteds. And they were also spitting blood in his face, and I'm sure some of it got in his mouth, and they were biting him, trying to infect him, but it didn't work because I guess because he's immune. He's completely immune to the disease because his body had it. His immune system learned how to fight it, I guess. So his development was interesting, and seeing the whole trajectory of him becoming human. Yeah, sure, the infection is still lingering, and he's still gonna have those like that super alpha super strength that he always will. It was interesting to see how he humanized and how he became a human again. Um, I think that covers about everything. It was a good film. Um, it's a good. It's like It didn't involve as many jump scares as 28 years later. It was not as scary. There were jump scares in this film because it's a horror movie and you want to stay true to the genre of the film. You want to scare the audience. And yeah, there were some parts. I also want to start off I want to say this as well. I really like the opening scene where it's Spike and the Jimmies meeting for the first time and they're in the pool, like the abandoned pool all together, and they're walking around him like intimidating him, and one of the Jimmies challenges Spike to a fight, and Spike pulls the Jimmy's pants down and stabs him deep enough to get him to nick an artery, and then blood spurts everywhere and the Jimmy dies. I think that was a really good way to start the film, to kind of set a tone for how gory this film is going to be and what the Jimmies are going to be like. These Jimmies are evil, they're horrible people, and it set a tone for how gory and bloody the film was. I think that was a very good opener. This was a good film. Usually in these kinds of trilogies, I don't really know if it's a trilogy, but I'm going to call it a trilogy because there's 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, and I'm assuming the next one's also going to be called 28 Years Later something, whatever the second title, the subtitle is going to be. Usually the second film in a trilogy is not the best. I think this one was a steady improvement. Not a significant improvement, but a steady improvement on the first one. The first half of 28 Years Later was really good. I really loved the first half of 28 Years Later. Second half was okay. There were some questionable things and that they did that I wasn't too big of a fan of. I will say though, this film, 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, does a much better job of maintaining a consistent tone throughout the entire part. The one scene that I kind of scratched my head at was when Kelson started dancing like a maniac to Iron Maiden. I found it a bit amusing. I thought it was pretty funny at first, but then as it went on, I was like, what is like I understand why people would enjoy it. I've seen some reviews where people genuinely actually laughed seeing it, and that's understandable. That's fine. Like I found myself actually somewhat entertained by it for a few parts. But then I was also like, what is this? Like, the film was doing such a good job of maintaining a consistent tone, and then it just got to that. And then from there onwards, it went back to its regular tone. So 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple does a much better job of maintaining a consistent tone than did 28 Years Later. And that's one thing I really liked about it. This one was consistently dark. It was gory. It was, terrible things were happening. The Jimmies were constantly being horrible people. That is about my review for 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. If you haven't watched it yet, I highly recommend you go watch it because it's a good film. It's a good horror film. It's not as scary as 28 Years Later. It does have jump scares, obviously, but it focuses more on the human side of, what happens in these kinds of worlds where, there's an apocalypse and zombies run everything. It was very interesting, yeah, and I'm excited to see where chapter 3 goes. Hopefully there's more of Jim. Hopefully we get to see Samson's story development further. Hopefully we get to see more Spike as well. Yeah, very good film. Good film. I would give it a solid 7 out of 10. Yeah. So thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, hit the notification bell button so you don't miss an upload. And yeah, peace.